everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. Alright, I am here to take another look, revisiting Hand of Fate Ordeals, and this is the special edition. This game should have been an absolute hit. This game should have been a huge success, and I'm not quite sure why it wasn't. Hand of Fate Ordeals feels the most like an adventure, a fantasy adventure game than any other of the deck builders that try to do that. It's a better game than Clank. It feels more like an adventure game than Clank does. The deck building is better than it is in Clank, which I always felt was kind of like pointless. Not pointless. It just the deck building just kind of felt meandering. It didn't really feel like you were honing in on a certain kind of character or character building, whereas this game, Hands of Fate, it definitely does. It's also a much better deck building adventure game than Thunderstone Quest, like way better. I do not get the praise for Thunderstone Quest at all. I don't get the sense at all that I am on an adventure in Thunderstone Quest, especially the way the deck building works in that game, where multiple players can have the same heroes in their party. It's just like, it's a huge thematic disconnect for me, and I'm trying to sell my copy, my Kickstarter copy of that game. But this game, Hand of Fate Ordeals, is so good in so many ways, especially the special edition, which I highly recommend. If you guys are interested in buying this game, go onto eBay. I've seen copies of the special edition go for like $50 or $60, I think. It's more than worth it. This game is fantastic for a number of reasons. Now, one of the main things I focused on in my initial look at the game was the look of the game, and my opinions on that have not changed. If anything, they've gotten even stronger because this game has such a unique look to it. The art design and the illustration was done by a guy named Ian O'Toole, and I need to find out what else he has done because I really cannot get enough of the art in this game. It's so bold. It's evocative. It sets up the world and the feel so much. It makes the game feel like some kind of a relic from the past or something, and that goes a long way in strengthening its theme of this being kind of like an ancient game that people played. And because you have these suits of cards, almost like a tarot style theming to some of the game, and the art is just incredible. And not only is it super good art, but there's just a ton of it. So these are all of the events that you will trigger as you are exploring the land. Some they're like locations, and you will go there and you will have to face off against traps, and you will have to go through like twisted canyons and swamps. And while they are mostly mechanical in nature, the text on the card does often go into a little thematic reason, or like why this is the smuggler's wharf. Fight 2 minions at the end of this combat, you may move to town. Okay, so you're at the wharf, you fight 2 monsters, and then the wharf is attached to a town. So after you have fought the monsters, you can move to town. Stuff like that. So there is some theming in how the art relates to the place and to the rules of that location. And then you have your just huge deck of abilities and items and skills that you can buy during your deck building phase. And so many of these have unique art and different names, and just, I don't know, it's so good. They look like old wood carvings, and I get excited when I see one that I haven't seen before, because I like to think about how I can use it to build my character. And then of course there are 3 different aspects, 3 different classes of character that you can build. You have your green, a red, and your blue. So you have your trickster, kind of like your conniving thief type guy. You have your soldier, And then what is green? I forgot what green is. Trickster, soldier, and it starts with a W. My mind is completely blanked. I'm going to look that up really quick because I don't want to forget that W here. Let's see here. My one major complaint, my only complaint really, is with the size of the rule book. I know I'm like the only reviewer who tends to judge a game based on the size of its rulebook, but it's Wanderer. That's the W. But it's true. I mean, look at this thing. It takes up, like, if you have to lay it out on your table, it takes up more than half of the board. It is a good rule book. It is well written. All the rules are there. It's organized. It has a great glossary in the back. It's just this big old thing that doesn't need to be this big. There's a lot of wasted spaces on the page, but there are also a lot of images, and it's a good rule book to learn the game. But anyways, we were looking at the deck building cards and Wanderer. The way you can buy weapons, the way you can buy armor, and the way the armor fits on your character card makes it feel like you are building a character, like in a dungeon crawl or adventure game. You're just doing it via deck building. You know, so my character here, I had this Wanderer spear. I put that over the spear there. I have this armor. I have a helmet that I can wear, and armor. Then if I was using a one-handed weapon, I could also get a shield. And I could also get like a little side item, a trinket or something to put on my character. And over here you have your cards in your deck. And then here is one of the most creative things about this game, is the way combat works, is you have to bind attacks from your hand to your weapon. And you would bind them by attaching them like that. And then you can keep on binding more, and you can have a certain number of cards bound to your weapon. And then there also is a chance system where when you attack a monster, you get to draw a certain number of strike cards off the top of the deck. And if you draw cards that have effort, then you can add that effort to that attack's power. If you draw other cards that you can bind, then you can add that power. And so you have a chance to build up, so you kind of know your strength going into a round of combat, but then there also is still a chance element using the deck of cards for that, for like kind of a dice roll. And very, very nicely done. The way that I have found that I have the most fun playing this game, I think it gives you kind of like the most bang for your buck in a number of ways, and that is the rules and the special edition of the game. And that is called the Endless mode. So not only is this game, I think, the best deck building adventure game, the game that gives me the most feel like I am building a character and going on an adventure in a deck building game, but this also might be the best roguelike experience I've had in a board game. I often hear people say that they want a dungeon crawl adventure game that feels like a roguelike board video game. And if anybody is unfamiliar with the term roguelike, it is based on an old game, an old ASCII art game called Rogue, which was all randomly generated, and you do runs basically. You start a game, you play until you die, and then you start over. And every time you start the game, most of the game is random, or almost all of the game in the old original versions of Rogue were random. And so you never really knew what you were going to get, depending on how the world was seeded, how the world was created at that time you hit play, depending on the kind of monsters that were in those first levels or the kinds of items you could find. The game would either be really difficult or not as difficult. Well, as games have progressed, the game design has become a little more forgiving to the player, and so we have the term roguelike, which takes aspects of the original Rogue but adds some quality of life things to them, such as not everything being random, or ways to upgrade your character, ways to progress through the game. Well, in Endless mode, in Hand of Fate Ordeals. It really actually should have been called a roguelike mode, and I think it would have gotten, I don't hear people talking about it. But what you do in the roguelike mode of endless mode is, normally in a game, you are going to create the world that you're going to move around and explore through these locations, and you are going to have 3 different levels basically. The first time you're going to go through all of the level 1 encounters. You're going to set your world up with only level 1 encounters. You're going to fight the level 1 boss. Then you're going to move on to your level 2 encounters, and you're going to explore, and you're going to fight the level 2 boss. And then finally you're going to make your world with the level 3 encounters, and you're going to fight the level 3 boss, thus triggering the end of the game. Well, in endless mode, what you do is you shuffle all of your locations together, thus creating your massive world here. You are seeding the world, you're seeding your roguelike world when you are shuffling your locations together. And then you take your town, and you put your town in the middle of the board, and you take a card called the Road Forward. And then depending on which level of the game you have reached, you start with level 1, you're going to take a certain number of encounter cards off the top. So you're going to take your Jack. So if I was starting a new game, I was going to take my Jack boss, I would take my town, and I would take my Road Forward. And then you would randomly choose 6 cards off your location deck, or your encounter deck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you would mix in your Jack and your Road Forward. And then this is the world. So this is the seeding of the world here. This is the seeding of the dungeon. And every game it will be different because everything is mixed together, and you never know what you're going to get. You might get a whole bunch of level 1 locations. You might get a bunch of locations that don't have enemies. You might get all enemy encounters. You might get a bunch of level 3s. You never know. And so as you're exploring, well, then you're going to reveal your world. One of the main differences is, in the normal game, certain locations could be used a certain number of times as dictated here. And some locations were mandatory to encounter, some were not. In this endless mode, all locations except for the town can only be used one time, and all encounter locations are mandatory. So it's pushing you to explore and pushing you to keep looking at new things. And there are penalties for idling. There are penalties for not exploring something new, or not buying a certain buying a card. There are loitering penalties basically in this endless mode. So you're constantly moving around the map, trying to hopefully get some good encounters, to level up your character, to get better gear, to get better skills. And finally, you want to locate your boss, which would be the Jack. And then you would randomly draw one of the bosses from the Jack deck. So you have Jack, Queens, and Kings are your bosses. And you're going to start with the Jacks. And then if you beat that level, you can go on to your Queens. And then you have to defeat a Queen boss, a Queen suit. And then you're going to have to defeat a King suit. But the game doesn't end there. This is endless mode. You can keep going. But if you beat the first boss, then you have to discover the Road Forward card and move on to that. And then you reset your game starting at level 2, and you move your little level marker up to level 2. And then you fight a Queen, like I said, level 3 a King. Then at level 4, things start getting more difficult. And as later levels go, you start adding these power cards, which make certain suits of enemies more powerful. Then you start adding little tokens to things to make things more powerful. So the game, every time you reset the game, it gets more and more difficult. The enemies get stronger, things get more dangerous and deadly. And you basically just play until you die. And then you die, and then you can start the game all over again at level 1 and see how far you can get again. I mean, it is the epitome of a rogue-like game in a board game fashion. I love it. Another thing that the endless mode does is you have these cards over here. You have your dealer's row. These are always the cards that you can buy during your deck building phase. Well, you always have 6 laid out. The endless mode introduces this idea of a burn token. And this is going to be a token that moves at the beginning of the round. Whenever it's the first player's turn, you move. What you do is whatever card this burn token is on gets recycled. It gets discarded and a new card gets drawn, and then the burn token moves to the next spot. So this is constantly cycling through the huge deck of deck building things that you can buy. So once again, it's a mechanism that is pushing you forward, and it's revealing more about the game. In this mode of the game, you get to play with almost everything that you have in the game. You don't have to, one of the things I don't like about the campaign mode in this game is it limits some of the stuff you can see, and it takes a little while to set up. In endless mode, you get the most bang for your buck because it's the easiest to set up, and for me, it gives you the most fun. Now, you can play endless mode in a cooperative or competitive way. You can play endless mode using the quests from the cooperative or solo mode, where you can build your character with some little side quests that you can do and get some different special items or skills for your character. You can mix in the trap cards. So I have the trap cards mixed in, which you will be able to face off against these certain traps that you can add to the game, which makes some of the encounters more deadly. The only thing I think that you don't get to play with is the special locations for the campaign missions. And that's not very many. That's just these that get set aside that you don't use in endless mode. But yeah, I just really wanted to revisit this. Oh, I forgot to also look at the relics. And the relics you can buy as you defeat enemies. You're going to get these relic tokens here, these shards. And at certain points during the game, I think each time you beat a boss, if you have enough of those, you can purchase one of these relics, which is like a super powerful item that you can equip to your character. But yeah, I just really wanted to take another look at this game. Unfortunately, the designer of the game, of the board game, the publisher, has gone out of business. The creator of the original video game that this is based on has gone out of business. So I think the chances of us ever seeing anything more for Hand of Fate Ordeals is pretty slim to none. But I do feel like there is enough game in this box to make a purchase worthwhile. And if you're looking for a cool deck building game that feels like an adventure game, it feels like a dungeon crawl, you're building up a character with cool skills and items, you're only dealing with one character, you are moving around a map with cool art and neat things to encounter, I cannot recommend this game enough. Like I said when I started this video, this game should have been a hit, and it's a real shame that it's not, because there was a lot of passion poured into this game. A lot of artistic integrity was used here, and it's an all-around fantastic game, and it's a real shame that it wasn't more successful when other lesser games in this style were far more successful. Sorry guys, well, I hope you enjoyed that quick look revisit of Hand of Fate Ordeals. Check it out. Go to eBay and grab a copy. All right guys, we'll talk to you later. Bye bye.